Disasters impact people, livelihoods, assets, ecosystems, economies, and communication networks and can lead to long-term development setbacks. In the last 2 decades, Sri Lanka has experienced an increase in the losses from disasters. The majority of disasters in Sri Lanka result from climatic processes such as droughts, floods, landslides, and cyclones. With the growing threat of extreme climatic events, disaster is likely to increase. Thus, reducing disasters and managing its risk are critical. Understanding of the typical seasonal and regional climate can help anticipate hazard risk with temporal and spatial precision. Monitoring hazard can help give early warning. Predictions of hazard risk some days ahead can help with mitigating the risks. If early warning can be given of the hazard, then exposure to the hazard can be minimized. The cartoon can help us understand the terminology of hazards, exposure, and vulnerability. Hazard. The unstable rock on top of the mountain is a representation of a hazard which may or may not occur. If and when the rock falls, it can lead to significant losses. Elements at risk. Here, the 2 buildings, its assets, and people inside are the elements at risk. Exposure and vulnerability. The building closer to the mountain has high exposure and is less vulnerable as it is reinforced. The house further from the mountain has less exposure than the reinforced building. As a result, it may not be at less risk. On the pie chart to the left, we can see that of all the disaster affected, floods account for 46%, droughts account for 32%, 2004 tsunami for 16%, and cyclones account for 5%. On the pie chart to the right, of the fatalities from all disasters, landslides account for 59%, floods account for 39%, and cyclones account for 2%. Note, the tsunami of 2004 is not included here. The table shows the number of affected people from disasters annually. The disaster-affected count has increased significantly in recent years. By category, we can see that droughts affect the largest number and that landslides lead to the largest number of fatalities. One can break up disasters into man-made and naturally caused. Natural disasters arise from climatic, geophysical, and epidemiological processes. Often there's a human role in disasters sparked by natural causes. By understanding climate, we can interpret risk. By monitoring the climate and predicting it days to months ahead, we can implement an early warning system. Note the characteristics of rainfall, wind, solar radiation, and temperature that can drive climatic hazards such as extremes, seasonality, and trends can be used to interpret probable future disaster statistics. This can influence policy and disaster management. Historically, flood disaster has been declared more commonly in western, southwestern, northern, northeastern, and eastern parts of the country. There are floods in other provinces yearly after heavy rainfall. During May to August, floods on the western slopes and plains are due to heavy rainfall. During September to January, floods in the eastern slopes and plains are due to heavy rainfall on the eastern slopes. The regional and seasonal history of floods can approximately represent the future risk of floods to first order. Climate variability and climate change shall affect risk. Drought is the disaster that affects the most number of people. Note that same person can be affected multiple times. Drought disaster has been declared more commonly in the outside of the western slopes and plains and in the districts of Kandy, Matale, Kagal and Hambantota. There are droughts in the other provinces yearly after major rainfall shortages. Drought is more likely to occur in the regions with less rainfall and with high demand for water. With rainfall deficits and high radiation and high evaporation, there is more drought from February to April and June to August. The drought hazard risk map shows distinct spatial variability. Lower risk of drought hazard in the western slopes. High risk of drought in southeastern, northern and northwestern districts. Hazard maps based on rainfall to the right reflect the disaster history. We have also shown that it reflects the seasonality as well. We are updating the drought risk map every month. Cyclone is a wall in the atmosphere with very strong winds circulating around it in anti-clockwise direction in the northern hemisphere and in clockwise direction in the southern hemisphere. A full-grown cyclone is a violent whirl in the atmosphere 150 to 1000 km across, 10 to 15 km high. Storm is a disturbance of the atmosphere with strong winds and usually rain, thunder, lightning or snow. There have been 5 cyclones during 20th century, 4 in 21st century that made landfalls, namely Neelam in 2012, Mahasen in 2013, Oki in 2017, Burevi in 2020. Cyclone disaster incidence map. On the left shows that the northeast districts are at high risk. The northeast receives cyclonic rainfall from November to December from storms and cyclones in the Bay of Bengal that are directed by the northeasterly winds towards Sri Lanka. The cyclones that are stalled in the Arabian Sea in the other months too can lead to risk. In addition, there are cyclonic storms that form south of Sri Lanka and travel to Arabian Sea while endangering people and assets in Sri Lanka. Landslides caused most of the fatalities due to natural disasters, and the frequency and magnitude have increased in recent years. The frequency of losses due to landslides is increased due to forest clearing, poor drainage, and poorly designed construction. The highest landslide risk is in the Kagal district, followed by Ratnapura and Nuvareli districts. The seasonality of landslides is influenced by the seasonality of the rainfall climate. Landslide risk is high on the eastern slope during November to January and is high on the western slopes during May to November. Vulnerability and resilience can be affected by multiple disasters in the same place. It is useful to know the places with multiple hazards. The areas with high risk can be termed as hazard hotspots. The multi-hazard map to the left face the disasters by the fatalities. If a disaster occurs, it can affect the vulnerable. The southwestern hill slopes and the northeastern coast are the multi-hazard hotspots in Sri Lanka. The multi-hazard risk map to the right depicts incidence data from 1960 to 2000. The risk of disasters can be managed. The risk of hazards can be mitigated. The vulnerability and exposure can be reduced, and resilience enhanced through disaster preparedness. If disasters occur, then the impacts can be reduced and recovery can be accelerated. When disasters happen, those who respond to it immediately have been the neighbors, families, community including community-based organization. their support remains pivotal. Thus, it is helpful to empower youth with the essential literacy about disasters as it can help with their support and also with better awareness of how to minimize risk and how to be better prepared to respond. In general, information on hazards and early warning can help motivate and risk reduction.